Labor News Conference. Welcome to another edition of Labor News Conference, a public affairs program brought to you by the AFL-CIO. Labor News Conference brings together leading AFL-CIO representatives and ranking members of the press. Today's guest is Saul Stettin, president of the Textile Workers Union of America, AFL-CIO. Tens of thousands of labor management agreements are bargained peacefully every year. New units of workers are organized into unions peacefully every day. But all too often, employers in the textile industry fight bitterly to block the efforts of their employees to form unions and to negotiate in good faith on hours, wages, and working conditions. One company, for example, has a dozen convictions for labor law violations. Here to question Mr. Stettin about labor management relations in the textile industry and how they can and should be improved are Tom Joyce, economic correspondent for Newsweek magazine, and Dale McFeeters, labor correspondent for the Scripps Howard newspapers. Frank Harden speaking. And now, Mr. Joyce, I believe you have the first question.
Mr. Stettin, a moment ago there was a reference to a company that has persistently violated the law. Can you identify that company and give us some of the details?
That's the J.P. Stevens Company that liquidated so many of its operations up in the north and migrated all of their operations to the southern part of this country. They employ approximately 45,000 workers based mainly in the Carolinas. And our organization has been trying to help the workers in this corporation to form unions, but this company's policies have been so flagrant, so difficult that we have been unable to break through. We've had 4 Court of Appeals decisions against the company in some 10 major cases. In fact, this company has also been found in contempt of court, and they appealed to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court wouldn't take it, and the decision now stands, and they've lived up to it. But nevertheless, they really aren't living up to it because the denials are continuing. We've had well over 150 workers that have been reinstated with back pay. They've paid over $1 million in back pay. But justice delayed is justice denied. People get their back pay, but by that time they're elsewhere.
How does this company rank in terms of the industry size and in terms of employment?
It's the second largest textile company next to Burlington in this country.
Why, Mr. Stettin, do you think there is so much resistance, not only by this company, but also by other textile manufacturers, to unions and organization generally?
Well, they have the belief that they can make more profits by keeping unions out and by maintaining a way of life in which the power structure of the communities in the South, which are dominated by the big textile corporations, will be continued. There is no industrial rights or industrial democracy in those sections.
Do you think, Mr. Stettin, that the concentration of the industry in the South has anything to do with it?
Oh, that has a lot to do with it. I think the fact that the industry has concentrated there is to keep unions out and to keep wages low and to be able to make the kind of profits they're making.
Mr. Stettin, when Congress just yesterday extended the Economic Stabilization Act to permit continuance and controls, members of Congress said that those workers making less than $3.50 an hour would be exempt. Can you tell us what this might mean to your industry, since I believe workers in your industry are paid on the average less than that figure?
Well, the average wage is approximately $2.70 an hour, and the employers in the textile industry have been doing very well. In fact, their profits between 72 and 71 were almost 15.5% higher after taxes than they were in 71. And yet the wages are on the average of about $1.10 an hour below the wages of the average worker in all manufacturing. And if you take in fringe benefits such as vacations and holidays and pensions and the like, where they pay around 20 to 25 cents an hour, where the average in manufacturing is between 60 and 65 cents an hour. The average worker in the textile mill in the South earns approximately a total of $60 a week less than the average worker in all manufacturing. We believe that this $3.50 an hour, which the Congress voted as to be not inflationary, in other words, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it was felt that anyone making less than $3.50 an hour should not be considered in any kind of a wage price freeze. And we think that now the textile employers can't argue that they can only pay 5.5.
Would you have an opportunity this year to make that point at the bargaining table?
Yes, we will be making that point because we intend to be reopening our contracts with those employers where we do have collective bargaining agreements in the southern part of this country, and we will make that argument.
Can you tell us specifically what kind of wage increases you're going to go after and what kind of fringe benefits you're going to be looking for?
Well, we are going to seek to improve the wage level to a level closer to that of all manufacturing average because the employers themselves are having a problem in the South. They're competing with other industries for workers, and this is becoming a serious problem with them. Now, insofar as what our proposals will be, we will be doing that as we have conferences with our delegates in the southern part of the country. I just returned from a meeting in Eden, North Carolina, where we had a meeting of our leadership, where there is strong feeling that we should reopen our contracts. We will seek improved vacation pay, improved holidays pay, and we will be seeking higher wages, and we will be seeking supplementary pension benefits for the workers.
Could you tell us something about the import problem in the textile industry? It would seem that you might be faced with the same situation that occurred in the electrical assembly industry, where most of the manufacturing or unskilled parts of it were sent to factories overseas. Do you see any kind of development like this in textiles?
Well, there has been a temporary lessening of imports from the four countries such as Japan, Taiwan, Korea, and Hong Kong as a result of the agreement that was made well over a year ago. But imports is still a very serious problem for the textile industry. And even though the southern textile employers fight our union, we've been working with them to limit imports from other sections of the country. But a new development is taking place. Many of our textile companies are now becoming multinational corporations, and they're beginning to open up textile factories throughout the world in order to get cheaper labor, in order to make more profits.
Mr. Stettin, I believe that there are slightly more than 1 million textile workers in this country, yet only 250,000, I think, are organized. Can you tell us how the corporations, the big textile corporations, have managed to keep unions out?
Well, there seems to be a conspiracy on the part of the textile employers in the South, many of whom use the same attorneys, whose attorneys show up with the same proposals whenever we do win a collective bargaining election. And when we sit down to bargain, they refuse to give us simple, effective, intelligent grievance machinery. They refuse to give us the principle of voluntary arbitration in the contract. Here we've heard so much talk about voluntary arbitration has been promoted in the steel industry, but the southern textile industry, even once we win an election, refuses to grant the union the right to arbitrate or the right to have a simple system of collecting dues so that the union will exist. In other words, we find that in the South there appears to be a conspiracy on the part of the textile employers with one another to deny their workers the right to simple industrial rights and industrial freedom. In other words, there is no industrial freedom for the workers in the southern part of this country.
When you say a conspiracy, do you mean the kind of conspiracy that involves dirty tricks and illegal methods?
Yes, I mean exactly that. For example, you have, well, that's in addition to the fact that they conspire with one another to cooperate with one another in case of a labor dispute. If there is a labor dispute in the South, the other employers will help that employer by doing some of his work. But in addition to the second point you raise about the illegal methods and tactics that they may use, we have a Watergate situation for all practical purposes in J.P. Stevens. J.P. Stevens has a plant in Wallace, South Carolina, employing some 500 workers, where the organizers that were in that particular community were staying at a motel. And we now find that that motel's telephones where these two organizers were living were being bugged. In fact, so much so that it's been in the public press. The FBI is now involved. The company has laid off 3 of its executives of the Wallace, South Carolina operation, and the case is now before the grand jury.
Why can't the textile workers seem to win this fight, though? There have been other industries where employers were equally, if not more, hard-headed. Coal comes to mind, Little Steel, the original organization of the auto plants. What's so different about the textile industry that it can't be organized?
Well, the one thing about the textile industry, which is beginning to change, is the fact that you've had the principle of the company house, the company police, the company courts, the company judges. It was company dominated. Now that's changing as many of the companies are giving up these company homes, and a new generation of people are coming into the industry. The young people that are coming in, the black workers that are coming into the industry are showing much more courage, and we find that we are beginning to win more elections. We're beginning to have more progress. But because of this conspiracy, once we win an election, the job isn't completed. You now have to bargain for a contract. And the delay in the bargaining process is such that we find ourselves having to go back to the National Labor Relations Board, as we're doing with the J.P. Stevens, filing unfair labor practice charges, using all kinds of gimmicks to delay. And, well, the best example is the strike that's now going on at the Oneida Products, an underwear company whose plant has been in operation there for many years. It is a company that came from the north to the south. They make underwear products. Their products are sold under the label of Sears Roebuck, Montgomery Ward, J.C. Penney, and Kresge or Kmart. We won an election in Lane and Andrews, South Carolina in November of 1971. And between November 1971 and January the 15th, a period of almost 15 months, we tried to bargain out a contract. The company refused to grant us a simple provision for the right to arbitrate grievances, so there won't have to be strikes all the time or disputes. They wouldn't grant us a checkoff. They wouldn't grant us proper seniority rights. And on January the 15th, by a secret ballot vote, those workers voted to strike. The strike is now on. The strike is in its 4th month. There is an example of the kind of problems we're confronted with. In Wellman Industries, in Wellman, South Carolina, just a few miles away, maybe some 40 miles away, there we won an election 15 months ago. We have been unable to bargain out a collective bargaining agreement. And you might say, well, why haven't we had the same success that the other industries have had? Well, they haven't been as strongly organized into big corporations as they've done in the last few years. I think the growth and the acceleration of bigness in textiles is going to promote the possibilities of organizing the industry in the South.
If I can change the subject for a second, Mr. Stetton, there's a disease that's apparently unique to textile workers called bisonosis or brown lung. And I understand there are efforts underway to make it a compensatory disease like black lung in the coal mines. I wonder if you could tell us about the progress of this. And
the progress has been very, very slow. We've tried to get the employers in this industry with whom we do deal as well as the American Textile Manufacturers Institute, to join with us and to join with Dr. Selikoff of Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, who's working very closely with us on this very, very serious problem of this disease known as bisonosis, which exists in the cotton textile industry, which exists in the asbestos industry. But the employers have refused to cooperate with our union. They want to work by themselves, and the progress has been very, very slow. But there is some progress being made, and some of the states have already made this a compensatory item under workmen's compensation.
Mr. Stettin, a moment ago we were talking about organization and your difficulties. While there has been some progress, as you note, it's not been fast enough. Can you tell us if you think the AFL-CIO is doing enough to help you?
I would say that the labor movement generally is beginning to recognize the significance of the southern part of this country, which sends so many Dixiecrats to the Congress of the United States, which limits the ability of Congress to pass proper legislation in the interest of all the people of this country. I think the Industrial Union Department of the AFL-CIO, under the leadership of I.W. Abel, is doing a magnificent job. We now have a coordinated organizing program underway in the Southeast and in the Southwest. One is based in Charlotte, North Carolina. The other is based in Texas. In fact, only last Tuesday, I participated in a meeting with Nick Zonerich, the organizational director of the IUD, and with I.W. Abel, the president of the IUD, who is also president of the United Steelworkers, where we had a conference of 100 leaders of the trade union movement in the South. These were full-time representatives reviewing the coordination and the progress that's now going on, especially in North and South Carolina. And I would say that the labor movement is beginning to recognize more than ever the significance of spending more time in that part of the country, and I think they're beginning to make progress.
Let me ask a question about the situation of the unions in the textile and clothing industry. To take steel as an example, the industry is organized from the time the ore comes out of the ground through ingots till the time it's fabricated, but there are 2 textile unions and 2 garment unions. Why is there no across-the-board organization in the industry?
You raise a very, very good point. It is unfortunate that there isn't a greater degree of cooperation between all of the unions in the apparel industry. Since I became president of the union, I've asked the other textile union to sit down with our organization and work out a merger agreement. I'm very much for bringing about a merger of the 2 textile unions. And I'm also strongly in favor of developing a system of cooperation in the textile and apparel industry, which would take in shoes and hat cap, and it would take in the amalgamated clothing workers, the international ladies garment workers, the leather workers, the shoe workers, and the textile workers, to have the same kind of cooperation there as they have in the building trades, in the metal trades, and in the maritime trades.
Thank you, gentlemen. Today's Labor News Conference guest was Saul Stettin, president of the Textile Workers Union of America, AFL-CIO. Representing the press were Dale McFeeters of the Scripps Howard newspapers and Tom Joyce of Newsweek magazine. Frank Harden speaking, inviting you to listen again next week. Labor News Conference is a public affairs production of the AFL-CIO, produced in cooperation with the Mutual Broadcasting System.